my initial reaction was like, oh wow, it's like scratchy and it sounds out of tune, you know. But then you know, you give it a second listen, you realize, oh, it sounds out of tune because he's just playing different notes than we play. Like he's playing like, yeah, okay, that like C sharp sounds really flat in the key of A, but he's hitting it the same place every time, and it's just creating a different sound than we're used to. And yeah, like the strings are scratching a little more than, or maybe a lot more than like you're used to hearing from someone playing Bach or something. But listen to the groove, like listen to how he's making the notes dance.
Our guest today has such a great backstory, and he has built such a cool career for himself. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are chatting today with Ethan Jodziewicz, who has done so many amazing things in the acoustic music scene. Right now, he's playing bass with Sierra Hull and played on her Grammy-nominated album recently, Weighted Mind, but that's just a tiny sliver of what he does. He's on the road most of the year and is a totally phenomenal bass player and unique talent. Studied with Edgar Meyer, but he doesn't sound like Edgar Meyer, although obviously influenced by Edgar Meyer. We get into that. We get into where he's been, where he's going, what he's learned in the process, how the heck you play the sort of music he does in terms of bow technique. We get real geeky in terms of that sort of thing. So great conversation. And thank you to our sponsors, D'Addario Strings, Robertson and Sons, and Upton Bass. More on them in a bit. But let's dig into this conversation and hear some groovy bass playing from Ethan Jodziewicz. Ethan, how's it going, man?
Jason,
how are you?
It's going good.
Nice.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I've been on the road. I just got back to San Francisco, and so getting settled and kind of regroup. Where have you been recently? You been traveling, or you been in Nashville? Where are you at right now?
I'm in Nashville right now, and actually I've been here for about 2 weeks now. I've had some work in town, but actually 2 weeks off from the road, which is rare at the moment. So it's been nice to not have to hop a plane anywhere or drive any long distance or anything.
Oh man, yeah, for sure. Is there a certain point where it's like too much for you? Like, is 3 weeks in a row too much for you, or you? I think about that myself. Like, I definitely have hit too much the last year.
Yeah, I guess it depends a lot on the variety and the way that I'm traveling.
Yeah.
Right now with the stuff that I'm doing, I'm not doing a whole lot of stints where it's like 3 weeks with the same band or something. So if I am gone for 3 weeks, which actually the day after tomorrow I'll be leaving and won't be touching base back home in Nashville until the end of July. But it's a variety of things, you know. It'll be a couple gigs this weekend and then out on the road with another group for a couple weeks at a time, and then teaching at a camp, and then, you know, out, so on and so forth. They're kind of all strung together, and just stuff where, you know, if there's a day or two in between this gig and that camp or whatever, where it sometimes just doesn't make sense to come home and, you know, like just be in my bed for 8 hours and leave again, you know.
I know that feeling well. I was just thinking about these last few days. I was in Indianapolis, then Bloomington, then Oberlin, then Cleveland, which was actually a lot of fun. It was about 100 degrees up there, but yeah, just like wandering around Cleveland yesterday, sort of longing to be back in my own bed, which I was able to do then last night.
Yeah. Were you up at that I thought I saw you post about that that bass builder meetup in Oberlin.
That's where I just was at. In fact, I was just chatting with two Nashville luthiers, Randy Hunt, and then also
Randy.
And then Dustin Williams too. Dustin wasn't there, but
I know them. I know them both.
I figured you would being in town, so that's cool. Both great guys, and Randy's building a bass, so he's working hard on that. It was this super cool wood too. I forget what it was, but it was not a traditional maple spruce bass. It was this really intricate figuration in the wood, and that I had a blast at that. And seeing what the state of affairs is in the bass building world, it was really inspiring, actually.
Nice. That sounds so cool.
Yeah. So you're from Olympia, right? You're from Washington?
Olympia, Washington.
Okay. Do you get back to Washington much? Or I'm just curious.
Pretty much at this point, I haven't been taking too many trips of my own accord out there. But I'll get through there on tour, once or twice a year. And if I luck out, some tour will end, in or near Olympia, and I'll have a few days afterward to hang out. My mom still lives there. My sister lives in Seattle. So it's nice to be able to visit now and then.
Yeah. Well, I love it up there. I have relatives in Seattle, cousins and an aunt and uncle. And so I've been going there off and on my whole life. And it's, man, talk about a place that feels like it's changed in the last decade. And maybe not Olympia, but Seattle in general. It's just astonishing. Maybe not all in good ways, but it's sort of turning into a San Francisco in some ways. But
is that where you live, in San Francisco?
Yeah. I live in San Francisco after a long time living in Chicago and working all over the place. I actually used to work down in Tennessee, in Memphis, Tennessee, in this chamber orchestra.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and we actually premiered Edgar Meyer's Second Bass Concerto way back in the day, which I'm sure has gone through. Oh, really?
Nice.
Yeah, I'm sure it's gone through a bunch of iterations. But yeah, we're out here in San Francisco, and it's interesting being out here. I thought this could be kind of an interesting thing to explore. Like, to me, even though there's a lot going on out here, Bay Area is big. It still kind of feels removed from the rest of the country. It probably felt even more so growing up in Olympia. Like, did you kind of feel like you were in your own world up there in Washington growing up?
Yeah, a little bit. You definitely do get the sense that there's a lot, especially like in the acoustic music kind of world, which I've been involved in for a number of years now. That a lot of that stuff is happening, out in Boston or in New York City or Nashville, and also in Colorado, there's quite a scene for it. But what I honestly, when I was a younger kid in Washington, I was so focused on sort of more of a classical music path than I am now. That when it came time to make a decision, like if I was gonna go away to a summer camp or something, I would, given maybe the option of going to, there's like Mark O'Connor has been doing these camps, and I think he does one in California, and I know in Nashville for years. But given when it came down to decide, like, okay, well, I could go to one camp this summer, if it was between that and say like Interlaken, or Domaine Frege, I'd end up going to those sort of more, more classical study type of places. It wasn't until maybe that I had already left Olympia that I quite realized some of the scene that I was surrounded by, and some of the great players that I now know that I met different places, other than the Northwest, who came from there and were living there, around my same age group when I was growing up there.
So was it not until you got to Curtis and started to work with Edgar, is that when the interest got sparked or really kindled in the acoustic music scene?
No, and although I would say that probably a lot of it initially came from hearing Edgar the first time. just on recording, you know. I sort of, you know, the first like great bass players I got to hear live. Well, like I got to, you know, I got to see Gary Carr play when I was 11 or 12 or something, you know, it just blew me away. Or maybe younger than that, maybe 8 or something. And it totally blew me away. And, you know, it felt like, man, like you can be a classical player, you can be a classical soloist on the bass. Like that's really cool. And, you know, I think, I don't know. I think I sort of had an attitude as a younger kid that, classical music was the serious music and was the, you know, the stuff that you had to work really hard to get good at. And, you know, you got to play all this beautiful repertoire and you got to do all this cool stuff like that. And I sort of, you know, and we're talking, you know, when I was 10 or so, like middle school age, that I wasn't really interested in even the notion of playing jazz or playing fiddle music or anything like that. And it just, you know, it just kind of slowly started infiltrating my mind. I think that the big moment where I realized kind of the power of like, I guess like folk music was when I was 11, I went to a contra dance for the first time, which is, you know, it's a social dancing. It's kind of related to square dancing. Mm-hmm. And the people playing sort of been aware of in the scene, but you know, they were playing fiddle and piano and guitar and just like playing all these cool tunes that like made you want to move and made you want to dance and had this groove to them. And I just had so much fun, at that dance that night that all of a sudden I was like, man, like this stuff's actually really cool. And you know, probably sometime around then is when I got my first record with Edgar Meyer on it, which was that Appalachian Journey album.
Sure.
With Yo-Yo Ma and Mark O'Connor. And I heard that and I was like, man, okay, cool. This is like people who on a certain level like understand and are living within this sort of folk music tradition, but they're also like completely staying true to their, you know, their roots in classical music as far as high level of finesse to their playing, you know, and so once those two kind of went together for me, you know, that it just started seeming like a more reasonable thing, to be able to just pursue this music that was feeling really good to me, and you know, not feel like not feel like I was doing something unserious, you know.
Right. I think that rang the bell for a lot of folks, seeing Yo-Yo Ma up there, along with Edgar and Mark. I remember so clearly listening to that album and just being totally blown away and just trying to soak it all in. Did you start, right? Did you start, experimenting on bass, trying to learn any of those tunes or anything? Or because you said you're straight up classical, which was my path too. Were you Were you doing some of that acoustic music, or what did that look like in addition to the classical stuff? Yeah.
Well, so taking a step back to my first bass teacher, which I only took a couple lessons with. I took group lessons with this me and this other guy in Olympia, and she you know, this, I was again probably 8, 9 or 10 or something, and she introduced us to the concept of learning by ear. It was like this special day of the lessons where she said, okay, today we're going to start learning something by ear, you know, and we're like, okay, this is cool. Like, this is different than like looking at the sheet music or something. And she taught us this tune, just basically note by note, phrase by phrase, called The Red-Haired Boy, which is a, you know, pretty standard classic of the old time and bluegrass, repertoire. And I didn't know that at this time. I just knew it was this cool tune that I'd learned, you know, completely by and so fast forward a couple years later, when I was getting into playing contradance music, everyone was playing Red Haired Boy. Like that was just a common tune for someone to call at a jam or at a dance. and so I was like, oh, like I know this. I've learned this before on the bass. But then I started immediately realize that, the way I'd learned it, like, yes, I'd learned the notes, like technically, like, it's an A here and an E there, but there's so much more than just the notes to fiddle music. It's if you were to take if you were to notate just the notes that you hear on paper and give it to somebody who reads well and have them play it, it's not you and they only play what's on the page. You're only going to be getting half or less than half of the information that is there. There's so much in the bowings, as far as like the pulsing of the bowing, the movement of the wrist, the kind of the where you're choosing to slur and where you're choosing to not slur, and what notes are droned, where you catch little chords, so it I guess, like, I remember one day sitting down with my bass after school one day, when I'd realized that basically had started realizing that there was that much more to playing the fiddle tunes, and just not with anything specific in mind, not with someone saying like bow it this way, but just kind of recalling the sound of hearing other fiddle players and people in the band I was playing in play that tune. I just spent a whole evening painstakingly going through and trying to figure out how to make it groove like that.
Wow.
And that was sort of one of the turning points for me, was feeling that power of because there's a certain thing when you can play music, especially just on one instrument, that makes someone want to move their body and like makes them just like feel good in this rhythmic way. It's like, you're kind of wielding this really special power that that music holds. And so I think I got a little glimpse of it that night, and so that sort of sent me off on the trip of just taking these tunes that I'd also been learning on the mandolin and on the guitar and stuff, and trying to take them and transfer them over to the bass.
Wow, that's so good. Well, and the bowing, kind of locking into that, and what's not on the page, and what you do with the bow. That's the thing that's so mysterious to me, because I can't tell you how many times I thought, that sounds amazing. I find some transcription of some tune, and I start working on it. I think, I don't sound at all like what I want. And I love, and I think people would love to hear, and this is probably a super murky subject, but like, if we could just talk about bowing technique, like someone who's listening to this who knows their Beethoven 5 and their Bach preludes and their Bozzini Concerto, like what are some similarities and differences just in how you approach what you typically do on the bow in an acoustic music setting?
Cool. Yeah. Well, so I'll say this, like, all the Beethoven 5 and the Bach and stuff has been as important to me as anything, as far as just learning about using the bow in general. I mean, the one of the differences is one of the differences between playing the fiddle and playing the bass, of course, is that on the fiddle it's this tiny instrument in comparison. The strings are way thinner, they're way shorter, but the bow is, as far as I can tell, maybe someone who's better at math would correct me at this, or who actually knows, but the bow, the size of the bow and the length of the bow on the fiddle is not in the same proportion as with the bass, right? As far as mass and everything, like the bass bow, as far as how much longer the bass strings are, the bass bow is not that much bigger than the fiddle bow. And so there's this kind of like nonchalance that you can play the fiddle with, because the bow will do a lot of work for you, just with the weight, just with it's coming down from the top of the instrument. You can hang your arm down and just kind of let it grab the strings as it will. With the bass, you're not necessarily guaranteed that same result, because the angle of attack of the string is different. The strings are just thicker. Like if you don't really pay attention to how well you're digging into the string, as we all know, like you're gonna get notes that don't speak, or kind of squawk a little bit, or you didn't grab the string all the way. And so one of my goals, in playing fiddle music on the bass, and in general playing things related to fiddle music on the bass, is that I want to I hope this doesn't sound like bad to bass players out there, but I want to sort of counteract some of the natural tendencies of the bass. So if I play the bass like a fiddle, the notes aren't all going to speak. So I have to, at the basis of it, I sort of have to make a combination between like how I would play Bach and how I would get that, go for a really smooth, even like core tone the whole time, and put that in combination with the different kinds of pulses and movements and patterns that you get in different kinds of fiddle music. So what that translates to, like I'll give it as an example, and people can, if they're interested, go check this out. But there was a fiddle player named Tommy Jarrell, who was from North Carolina, Round Peak area of North Carolina, who is kind of a hero to many people into old time Appalachian fiddle music. And he had this really particular bowing style where he had this pulse going, almost as if you're like pumping water out of a an old fashioned pump, or bouncing a ball or something. But he had this pulse that was constantly going on when he was playing. And if you just look at his right hand as he's bowing, it's making these beautiful patterns, like these figure eights or these cursive letters while he's playing this whole thing. And so he's constantly moving like in and out of the planes, the planes of playing, against the string. And so for me, if I start pulsing the bow and moving around a whole bunch like that, as much as he does, I start not grabbing the string as much, because I lose, you were dug into the string, and then you come out of it and you try and get back in, and it didn't quite catch, again. And so I guess what I find myself doing is trying to do what he's doing, but dialing it back just a little bit. So maybe not swooping quite as much, not pulsing quite as much, enough to get the groove and get the general sound, but then also to make sure I'm staying in connection with the string, so it doesn't sound like I'm just like kind of scratching away, but you can hear most of the notes, Yeah.
Wow, Tommy Jarrell. Okay, I'm gonna be sure to check him out. That's super cool.
Yeah, he's cool, and that kind of stuff took me a while. Honestly, took me a while to get into, and again, like the sort of that we get in our heads early on, or I guess probably at any point in our lives, like we're creatures of habit, so they say, and it can be hard to break out of like mindsets that we've gotten into in the past, or things that we kind of thought were the right way or something. And so I will say that, like, when I first started hearing Tommy Jarrell, when I started playing music with this great old time fiddle player, Tatiana Hargraves, who had never met Tommy Jarrell, but had studied with people who had studied straight from Tommy. And she was showing me these videos of him, and I just like didn't really get it to begin with. I was like, like my initial reaction was like, oh wow, it's like scratchy and it sounds out of tune, Right. but then you give it a second listen, you realize, oh, it sounds out of tune because he's just playing different notes than we play. Like he's playing like, yeah, okay, that like C sharp sounds really flat in the key of A, but he's hitting it the same place every time, and it's just creating a different sound than we're used to. That's very different than equal temperament or anything like that. And yeah, like he's the strings are scratching a little more than, or maybe a lot more than, like you're used to hearing from someone playing Bach or something. But listen to the groove, like listen to how he's making the notes dance,
Yeah.
And so it that would be my thing for people who want to go check out Tommy Jarrell or any other old time fiddle players, is to open your ears as much as possible, to everything that's happening beyond maybe some of the things that sound sound way different than the way you might approach the instrument.
This episode is brought to you by Robertson and Sons Violin Shop, and they have been serving the string community and the bass community for decades. Here's Don Robertson about the genesis of the chromatic C extension. Were you the first to do that?
As far as I know, I did the first chromatic extension on Paul Ellison's bass.
Yeah.
We were up here several days, day and night, in a row to figure this thing out, and we came up with this swivel capo style, and I think Paul's was first, and Edgar Meyer was second when we did.
Learn more about their chromatic extensions, basses they've got in stock, and everything else that they do at robertsonviolins.com. One thing that D'Addario strings specialist Lyris Hung gets asked a lot is, how can you keep your strings in better playing condition? Here are her thoughts.
I get a lot of this question. You know, people often ask me, I don't want to spend a lot of money. What can I do? And I mean, my answer is unfortunately really, really simple. And that's just to clean your strings, to keep your strings really clean. And a lot of people, moan and that, because they clean their strings. Most people will clean their strings, but not often enough.
There you go. Simple, huh? Keep that cloth handy and wipe down those strings after each use. Thanks to Dario for sponsoring the podcast. And then taking that and figuring out how to apply that to this instrument, and you used a turn of phrase that I love, and I kind of use with students talking about the bass, counteract some of the natural tendencies of the bass, and I think that's a super interesting concept. And here's my spin on it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Talking to a young bass student a lot of time, I'll use the comparison like that violin, that sort of freeness, like sort of the default nature of a violin string is just to ring easily with the bow. That's a generalization, but like bass, there's just so much more focus required, just maybe the ratio of string diameter to bow length, to who knows what, but like the default nature of the bass often is not to sound free and open, right?
Right.
But then I see someone like you or Edgar Meyer or someone else who's just got this virtuosity with the bow on the bass, and it's like almost like an optical illusion to me. Like I'm watching, I'm thinking, how am I hearing these timbres coming out of the bass? And again, this is an incredibly big topic, but like is it mostly through listening that you developed that free sort of quote unquote non-bass sound that you get so often?
Yes. and listen, and I mean, listening, but listening is such a broad term, because listening is referring to listening to other people play. And it's also referring to listening to yourself play. So, in the practice room, you're listening, and what, I think one of the big things, in fact, a bass student, I forget what college he's going to, but I just got an email a few weeks ago from a student who was said he wants to try and get into playing fiddle music on the bass and isn't sure where to start, and what I wrote back to him, and it's the same advice here, is to try to surround yourself with it. It's one thing to listen to Edgar Meyer and hear some things that sound fiddle-like that he's doing, and try and do that. But it's another thing entirely to like go to a festival and just hang out and like slink up to the back of a jam session and just start trying to play with people and just get it in your head, get it to the point where you're going to sleep at night and you just have all these tunes and this bow groove and all this stuff just like going around in your head. And by the time you pick up the instrument, a week later, you're just inundated with these sounds, and you have, it's a big topic.
Yeah, I know.
A lot of responses going around my head, but I'll say, okay, so to me, like the greatest musicians are the greatest improvisers, and the reason for that is because improvisation takes everything, right? Like you obviously have to have like a certain level of technical skill on the instrument, a level of knowing where notes are and how you connect them to make certain sounds, and so on and so forth. But you also have to have this like ability to connect all those skills that you have to what's coming out of your brain at that moment, to be able to listen to the sounds that are coming up in your heads, or be able to react to the sounds around you without hardly thinking, using all those things, all that skill and everything you have built up, and so it's to listen to like a Charlie Parker solo or something like that's every bit as impressive to me as somebody like nailing every note in a concerto beautifully, because Charlie Parker's playing all these notes with great tape up,
Mm-hmm.
and so the point I'm making there with the fiddle music is like, to basically, if you get something in your head, it really pays to trust the technique that you have already worked on, all the practice and work you've already done, to be able to guide you through something new.
Yeah.
Rather than feeling always that you have to, and again, like I said, like with this fiddle music or with whatever other pursuits I have musically, there's always a time where I'm going to go in and continuing times, maybe some now, maybe some next month, maybe all next year, I'll be like really focusing in hard on one particular concept. But, there's a level of just trusting your own musicianship and trusting your own abilities that you've built up to just be able to transfer what you're hearing in your head into actual sounds on the instrument.
Yeah, I guess it's there's so many similarities in music, again to learning a foreign language, right? And developing fluency.
Yeah.
Like, best way to learn Italian, go hang out in Italy, right?
Totally.
and but at a certain point, even if you have the words in your head, you're not speaking freely, which really is improvising. Like you and I are improvising the English language right now, but we wouldn't have been nearly at the same level of fluency, when we were 2 years old. Yeah, so wow, that's
sure,
yeah,
sure, but yet, like as like we've heard Victor Wooten say, the thing about language is that when you're a kid and you don't have any spoken language yet, you get to jam with professionals all the time. Like your parents, I've kind of I forget if it was exactly from hearing that from Victor, but I'm sort of have in the back of my head that if and when I eventually have kids, that I don't want to talk. I just want to talk normal sentences to them, normal, like intelligent conversation from an early age, because you basically absorb what's around you. If you listen to really good jazz, you're going to play really good jazz, and if you listen to really good improvisers in spoken language, you're going to be good at improvising in spoken language,
Yeah. So true. So true. And Victor, what a wise, deep guy. And so I just finished reading, I can't believe it took me so long, The Music Lesson. It's just incredibly inspiring. And it really gets you thinking about, what you're saying, does that sort of how we learn and how open and we are when we're young. It's really fascinating to think about.
Right. Totally.
And I, people always ask me to chat with folks about that I always forget to do, because I like talking about mindset stuff and that, but and I know it's not all about the gear, but I did just spend a week with a bunch of luthiers. So I've got gear on my mind. Can you just talk through what you're playing on, and then maybe even like, what's your tuning setup typically? Are you doing like as Edgar does? People love to hear about that.
Cool. So I am playing. I own one upright bass, and it is a Shen. It's a Shen Willowback, and I bought it after saving for a few years when I was 17 or 18 or something like that. And and it for what was in my price range, and for it just blew all the older basses in that price range out of the water. It just, what I like about this instrument is it's really clear and really crisp. It's not necessarily, it wouldn't be a good bass in the orchestra. I don't think. I mean, it could probably get set up a little differently to be better at that. But it's a really nice instrument for being a like an equal voice in the texture of like a band with other people, and that sort of goes back to something we were saying before about, the natural tendencies of the bass. But a lot of my setup, from just what this instrument does to begin with to how I have it set up is designed to make it be able to do both, like be able to be an accompanying instrument more in the background or the low end of the texture, but also be able to come up front and not have anybody say like, "Oh, here we go, another bass solo," but be like,
exactly.
"Oh, wow, cool." There's like a melodic instrument where I can hear what's going on and hear a musical line. So anyway, so it's that I do play in solo tuning on this bass, the drop E solo tuning. So my low string is standard tuned, and then the top three are all up a step, and that is the tuning Edgar uses, which I actually found out after, like the first time I ever played in solo tuning was to do I think I did the Von Hall concerto, and I played that low B string, and I was like, that sounds familiar. Like I've heard that sound before. and so I go back through these Edgar recordings, and there's a handful of tunes he's got that are in the key of B where he's landing on this big B on the bottom, and I'm like, man, okay, cool. Edgar must be playing in solo tuning, and so I pretty much, the first music school that I went to was Ithaca College, and stayed with Nick Walker and Sean Conley there, and that was the first time I had regular access to two basses, because they, the whole vibe. I get the sense maybe at a lot of school bass studios around the country or world now, but at the at Ithaca and Curtis both, everybody had two basses. Everybody had an orchestra bass, and I had this other bass that I could keep in standard tuning. I just put solo strings on my bass, and basically haven't taken them off since, or haven't played in standard on it since. Just a couple short moments. And I'm getting a little bit sidetracked. I'll finish talking about the gear in a second. But what I'll say about that is, for anybody, because it's becoming a popular thing now for people to, I mean, it kind of like even surprised me. Like I'll when I'm traveling around, people, I'll have people sometimes, write me up and say, "Hey, you're coming through my town. Like, do you have any time that morning and we could do a lesson?" And I'm always surprised at like how many people are playing in the drop E solo tuning, and they come in and they're they're I'm thinking we're going to have to be transposing for each other or whatever. And we're just on the same page. But, what I would say, for people who are interested in playing that, the decision that I made right to begin with was like, okay, cool, I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to transpose. I'm not going to transpose in my head. I'm not going to talk transposed. I'm not going to, which I think is kind of the common way that we'll do it, right? We'll standards and you put the solo strings on, but you're still maybe thinking in the key you learned it in, right? Mm-hmm. You're not, unless you have perfect pitch or something. But I made a decision when I started playing in solo tuning on my bass, that I wasn't ever going to think transposed, and that I needed to be basically all aspects of my bass playing needed to be as good as they were in standard tuning, which means like my reading just as good, my like improvising, everything like that. Even just my ability to like someone say, okay, this is in the key of D, and I don't have to think for a second like, oh, it's a whole step higher than I'm used to, mm-hmm. or a whole step lower than I'm used to, rather.
Right.
And I don't even remember, but yeah. So the first couple times that like a jazz gig came up or something, when I was first starting that, I would kind of chicken out and tune my bass down, because I knew that I'd be able to read changes quicker and improvise quicker on the fly in standard. But slowly I just started letting it inundate its way, into everything. And at this point, if I pick up someone's bass and stand, I'm a little embarrassed to say, my reading's like actually better in solo tuning now. And I have to, just because I haven't done a lot of playing on standard tuned basses in the last couple of years, I'm a little bit slower on that.
Interesting. Well, I was gonna ask how you thought of it. So that's it. So you play your open top string, and that is an A to you. There's no transposition going on at this point.
No, that's an A.
Yeah. Okay.
That's an A. And so yeah, that was kind of that kind of like messes with your mind when you first start, because you're used to like the key of like B flat having a few open strings that you can use, and like you can play a B flat scale across in one position without shifting, and in this tuning there's only one place you can play a low B flat, like up in the middle of the neck on the E string. And so to shift from a C, like your C that in standard would be whatever, like on the A string there, like third fret up on the A string or something. Yeah. To get from that note to a B flat, if you're walking down or something, you're going to have a big shift somewhere. You either have to on the E string, or you have to shift earlier somewhere and catch the C way up the neck on the low E string to come down to the B flat. So it does that was the thing that kind of messed with my mind to begin with, that all of a sudden like the key of A is smooth and has great open strings, but then the key of B flat's really hard, and all of a sudden the key of C sharp is like feels a lot better than it did before.
Right.
So I suppose if I were to go back, and I play a lot of bass guitar too, and I keep that in standard tuning, and that's a little bit different because it's easier to play across the neck anywhere, and but it would be interesting to go back to standard tuning and playing some of those keys that felt hard to me before, and they'd probably not feel as hard.
Yeah, well, I was curious. So it must be partially tonal, right? The timbre of the bass in the drop E tuning, the solo tuning for the top three. I'm sure the timbre and the lighter gauge is appealing, but then also, you must find, since you do it, that tuning clicks in better with a lot of the traditional music keys. Is that part of the reason why one might do that too?
Well, not exactly. It's all a trade-off.
Okay.
As an accompanist, like if you'll be playing time on the bass behind people, it's you with a standard tune bass, you have the key of D and G are really great because you've got open strings. You don't have to hold down as many notes if you're playing time behind people for a long time, and you don't have that exactly on this tuning. I mean, for the key of D, you can use the open A string and just hold down the low D. But the key of G, you're out of luck. You gotta hold down notes the whole time, and so it opens up, the key of A. As far as we're talking ease of playing here. I mean, obviously you can play in whatever key and it with slightly more overall effort, but it makes it doesn't necessarily make anything easier. Now, what I've done, and this maybe cycles back to the gear thing, but what I was doing for a while was tuning my B string, the low B string, down to A sometimes, and that would put me from low to high, E A E A, and I started doing it enough frequently. I got hip to the hip shot, the newer gizmo that they're making. That you've probably seen those, the flipper, down by down on the tailpiece that you can just flip and drop it to to whatever note you tuned it to. So I got one of those and put it on my B strings on the, what do people call it? I always count from the bottom. The second, I call it the second string. I guess maybe other people call it the third string, but, so put it on that string, and that way I could flip down and all of a sudden be in what's called a cross tuning. So like on the fiddle, there's all sorts of different cross tunings. You have a different tuning for the key of D, different tuning for the key of A. Sometimes you play out of standards. Sometimes you even tune. It's like a tuning called calico tuning, where the fiddle from low to high is tuned A, E, A, C sharp. And you have all sorts of stuff like that. So this was a way for me to just be able to catch one of those tunings. Essentially, it's backwards. On the fiddle, cross A would be A, E, A, E, and on bass it's E, A, E, A. But so that for playing tunes in the key of A, especially ones that are in cross A on the fiddle, doing that switch in tuning actually opens the whole bass up and makes it a lot easier to get that fiddle quality.
Yeah. Okay. Totally cool to think about. One thing that has impressed me about Upton Bass ever since I got to know them was how many artists there are out there that are so satisfied with the work that Upton has done for them. Here's Mark Ramirez on his experiences having Upton copy his beautiful Cavani bass.
I do a lot of moving around and giving master classes and stuff like this. I had a copy made of it by the Uptons, by Gary and Eric Roy at the Upton shop. They made a copy of it, but they made an even smaller copy. I think it's a 7/8 copy of the bass. I use it now. I use that bass for my solo playing, which I do a lot. Recently, I've been doing a lot, especially here. And it has a detachable neck. The detachable neck, man, I tell you, in Europe, it's the craze.
Learn more at uptonbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast, guys. I think I also noticed, are you using a Laborie endpin, an angled endpin? Did I see that?
I am.
Okay. When did you start using that? Yeah.
Well, I first tried that when I went to Domaine Frege, 2008, and got to be around Francois for a couple weeks, and Paul Ellison, and that's where I met Nick Walker, and who else was there? Sebastian Dubé and Ali Yazdanfar, and I'm probably forgetting. David Allen Moore. So all these players, a lot of them who use that endpin. Yeah. And so I just like was around it and kind of saw this ease of playing that a lot of them had. And, I think most of them, right, were people who'd studied with Francois, and like one of his whole things is like this, like just openness of the body, and like standing straight up, and like keeping your chest open, and good posture, and just being able to kind of float the bow over the bass like that. And so that's where I first got into it. So I got home from Domaine Frege and, went online and bought a what's it, like a 10 millimeter steel rod, just from like a steel distributor, and borrowed a butane torch from somebody, and bent it to the angle, and just stuck that in the regular slot on my bass, and just started experimenting with it. And just liked it. I mean, up to that point, I'd mostly been a sitting player, mostly sat for everything. I mean, when I was playing the contra dances and stuff, I'd stand sometimes just to kind of be able to move more. But it's standing with the bass with a straight end pin, and trying to have good posture, and trying to not have the bass like turned all the way one way or all the way the other way. it's like it puts weight on your thumb. It puts, it's more effort to hold it up, especially when you're playing with the bow. And you can't use when you're playing pits, obviously you can anchor your thumb under the fingerboard and support it a little bit. But so anyway, I just started liking it. And so when I got to Ithaca to go to school there, Nick just sent me up the road to a guy who had a shop there and drilled it out for me at the angle that I'd figured out using my bent pin. And so I used that all through my time in Ithaca. And then, when I transferred over to Curtis, I wanted to, Hal Robinson uses the angled pin, but Edgar doesn't. And I because I'd been on the angled pin for a while, and because it was this cool opportunity to study with Edgar and try and get my head inside what he was doing, I switched back to the straight pin when I got to Curtis to just try and have my setup more similar to Edgar's, and just so I could see better how his technique and all that stuff was working. And I stayed on that for at least a year, but I honestly started getting like an overuse injury in my left arm. And I was working with a great Alexander teacher through the school. Curtis, like, they they like hook you up with a lot of cool things, and it was great. They had an Alexander teacher who you just got to take lessons with for free if for a limited number of students once a week. So I was going in every week, and I'd bring my bass in, and we'd work on posture, and we'd try different things and these different exercises. And stuff was kind of getting better with my arm, but not 100%. And I came in one day, and it occurred to me to bring the angled end pin, and I said, "Hey, Ariel, like there's, we've been doing all this work, but there's something I didn't remember to tell you, but I used to play with this end pin." Put it in and stood up with the bass and played a little bit. And she said, "You have to do that." She said, "You look like a completely different person, completely different player, with that. Like all of a sudden your body's open. You're not slouching. You're not like, don't have all this weird shoulder stuff going on." So I just, it felt good to me. And also that someone who's an expert at, knowing when the body's in alignment and how your bones and muscles and everything need to be working to keep you physically healthy, said like, that looks better. You should do that. So I just switched back then and have been doing it since, and, haven't had any desire to go back to the straight pin.
Yeah. That's a strong endorsement for the angled pin, and it's really interesting talking to people in different musical situations and playing, whether orchestra or what you're doing, or but that's definitely becoming. I don't know if standard's the word for it yet, but it's getting there. If not, I mean, it's really, people are hip to those benefits you're describing.
Totally. People who see me play and hadn't heard of it before, because a lot of the stuff that I've been doing the last couple years is while it hasn't really been bluegrass that I've been playing, a lot of the audiences have been bluegrass audiences. And, so there's a lot of bass players, like bluegrass bass players, that'll come up to me afterward and say like, commonly they'll say like, "Hey, is your end pin broken?" and they're dead serious, they're like, right. Actually concerned. And I say, "No, but like, check this out. Like, look how it opens things up." And they'll say, "Oh, that's cool, but like, I wouldn't want to do that to my bass. Like, doesn't that hurt the value to have a hole in the bottom?" And the answer to that is like, I think nowadays, because so many people are getting into it, it probably doesn't hurt anything. People probably find that as a bonus that a bass is already drilled, because so many people are doing it or want to try it out. And,
yeah. I'm seeing them on bases. I'm seeing them on bases that are over $100,000 commonly.
Yeah.
So I think
totally.
You're probably okay with most bases. And thinking about health and overuse and all that sort of thing. And another thing that I think about a lot that I'd love to hear what you do is just life on the road in general, and like keeping healthy on the road, getting crap done on the road, like actually improving as a musician. I mean, if you're on the road that much, it can, and talking to people that have done like Broadway touring shows and whatever kind of work, it's really easy to just sort of fall apart and never, and the life of a successful musician, kind of like in what you do, involves a lot of road time. So like, what do you do to keep improving as a musician, keep from becoming like going completely out of shape? What have you learned, or what have, I know it's a journey, but what have you found?
Yeah, totally. Well, again, like maybe one of the first things we talked about, it depends on how you're traveling. And there's certain methods of travel that are easier, and there's certain methods of travel where, or schedules when you're actually on the road that just require you to kind of be in survival mode.
Yeah.
The main thing is when you're on the road, like you're out there to do shows, you're out there to like provide a good experience for somebody watching the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the ultimate thing, is you want to make sure that the live show is the best it can be. And sometimes that means like I'll have a lot of dates where, I'll leave for like a 3-day weekend of shows, and I'll take a flight out on a Friday morning at 6 a.m. and fly to another state, get in the rental van and drive to the gig, go straight to load in and sound check. And then you eat dinner and then like hang out for a half hour, and then it's showtime,
Yeah.
And on days like that, that's like a survival mode day. That's where you try and get as much sleep as you can the night before, and you wake up. I don't go anywhere without my neck pillow. I always carry a neck pillow and earplugs and a black beanie hat. And as soon as I get on that plane, when we're flying somewhere early in the morning, like neck pillow goes on, earplug go in right away and pick up a little bit of extra sleep. And same thing if I'm still feeling like kind of wiped out, like once we get in the van, say, we flew into I don't know, Denver, but now we got to drive to Fort Collins or something like that, then I'll try and sleep as much as I can on that ride, and just so that by the time we get to the venue, like I'm feeling rested. I mean, that's one of the biggest things for me, is just making sure I'm rested enough. I would say that's like number one on the road. And that comes before trying to like practice on the road or anything like that. I figure, get as much practice as you can done, feel as comfortable as you can with the material at home, because you're not always going to be guaranteed the time or mental energy to be working on stuff on the road. So that, I mean, that's important. I mean, I'll fairly regularly take naps before the show too. I'll try and wake up at least at the very least a full hour before the show, so I'm not groggy. But sometimes that, if it's been a hard travel day, sometimes that's the best thing for me. And I get this, Hal calls it having a second morning. And, so you have this second morning where you get this buzz again, and then you walk on stage an hour later and you like feel great, And so, so sometimes it's like that, but, sometimes it's other things. Sometimes, you have an off day and you have some time at the hotel, you have a couple hours that morning, and you can like really buckle down and work on some stuff. And, again, like, and this is a thing that I really learned a lot about from Nick Walker at Ithaca College, is, that the amount of time you practice, it is important, but maybe not quite as important as the way you're practicing. And so, I guess what being on the road necessitates is being able to, like, if you have something you need to work on for next week or something, but you're out on the road all this week, like, you need to be good at making improvement on that thing in like a 15-minute little power session before sound check,
Yeah.
Or 5 minutes, like whatever. Like you might not get 2 hours or 4 hours that day to like really work on anything. So that's kind of another one of the road skills, I guess, is as much as you can do from as little time as you have, and so but so that, that's generally how generally most of the travel that I've done up to this point, and the last 2 years, it's been between 100 and 150 shows a year on the road. I've been touring with this great mandolin player, Sierra Hull, and we do a lot of fly dates, and we do a lot of fly, and then a lot of time in the van, going fly somewhere and then take the van to 3-4 gigs and then fly home. And so that's kind of its own thing. And I'm just actually, this coming next week, I go out for the first time with this band, the Milk Carton Kids, which I just started playing with. And that is going to be traveling on a tour bus, which I haven't done before. And that's a whole different thing, because now instead of, with van touring or with plane, where you're taking flights and stuff, you load, you travel maybe day of show, you get to the show, you load everything into the venue, you play the show, you load everything out, van, you drive to the hotel, you load everything into the hotel, you sleep, and then in the morning you load everything back in and you drive to the next gig. And with the bus touring, everything, like the bus is your home, and you're not necessarily staying in hotels that often, but you have your bunk, you have everything stored there under the bus in the trailer or whatever, and the bus generally travels at night, so you play the gig, bus call might be at midnight, you hang out, do whatever, like if there's people in town, you can go hang with them, whatever, or you can just hop on the bus and go to sleep. But either way, you make sure you're on the bus by midnight, and then the bus leaves and drives through the night to the next show, and you wake up in the morning and you're already there.
Yeah.
And so then you have the whole day ahead of you, where you could catch more sleep if you wanted to, you could go check out the town you're in, or you could have time to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this will be the first bus touring I've done, so this is how I'm envisioning it. We'll have to check in and see if a little bit in I'm like, oh man, this is just as hard as anything else. But it'll be a different pace, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what sort of things that opens up as far as what I'm able to accomplish while I'm on the road.
Yeah, totally. It could open up a lot of things. I'm sort of envisioning Almost Famous and traipsing around, rock band, sort of the stereotypical rock band style. But like, man, you're so right. Like, not having to haul that gear into the venue, out of the venue, into the hotel, out of the hotel. That's a lot of wear and tear. It might end up being a more normal lifestyle, whatever normal lifestyle means. But
yeah, sure. Well, and that's the normal lifestyle thing is an important thing to think about, because if you're on the road a lot, like I said, I'm on the road, I mean 100 to 150 shows a year, but there's also travel days involved with that. I'm definitely out, like, away from home more than half the year. Mm-hmm. And so there, it's kind of like if you have this sort of ideal of how you want to live your life when you're at home, but then you're on the road and it's something completely different, there's a point where you're like, oh, whoa, like half of my life I'm spending like not like eating as well as I wanted to, or sleeping as well, or like getting as much work done, or like having as much time to like take hikes or whatever, and so, for me, in this became like very, very obvious to me, like 2 years ago. I started realizing like, oh my gosh, okay, cool. I'm a full-time touring, and I need to hold true to like where I am. And, so it's I think that's just an important thing to think about. And, it's easy for those of us who are like, super into playing the bass, super into like playing music as a career, and focused so much on that, to sort of partition our lives into like our musical life and our life outside of music. And I think what I'm realizing more and more in the last couple of years is I don't know that I want as much of a distinction. I don't know that I want to be one Ethan when I'm playing music or on tour, and another Ethan when I'm not.
Yeah.
And you know, the other, the other thing is like, you know, I'll say this, like when I went and got to study with Edgar, you know, there's all, you know, obviously there's like so many amazing things we've all heard him play and seen him do on the instrument that, you know, we'd love to learn and get our heads inside. And, you know, people will ask me like, well, what did you learn from Edgar? You know, and honestly, like, it kind of sounds like a lame excuse for what people maybe really want to hear. But one of the biggest things I learned from him is that I'm not Edgar, and Edgar's not Ethan. And the reason Edgar plays like he does is because he's Edgar Meyer. Like he has the personality of Edgar Meyer, completely 100%. Like, he's not trying to be anybody else. He's not kidding himself about who he is. He's like very comfortably Edgar Meyer, you know. And when I entered Curtis, you know, I was Ethan, but I was like, I want to learn how Edgar does what he does, and I want to learn how Hal does what he does, and I started to realize, like, oh, okay, like I'd be trying to work on certain ways of playing, or something that Edgar suggests to me or something, and it wouldn't necessarily feel the best for me. And I'd be like, why is that? Like, why is this hard for me to do this one particular thing? Like, why do I always want to do it this other way? And, you know, obviously some of those things were like, oh, I just have a habit of doing it this way, and once I try it the other way, I'll like it. But, you know, some was also like, oh, like, I'm actually just a different person. I have a different personality. And the personality is what, to me, should drive the music we make, you know. And so honestly, like, that was a thing. Like, going to school for 5 years was very important, very opportunity. I'm like immensely thankful for all of the time I got to spend with those guys, with Hal and Edgar and Nick and Sean. But then also, like, getting out of school and being just out kind of on my own, like working and like playing gigs and working on music and everything. And suddenly realizing, like, that, yeah, just that where I actually felt my body wanting to bring the music from, and how I wanted to approach playing this piece or soloing over this or whatever, was starting to come more freely from a place that was recognizable to me. Yeah. Where like I can, you know, if I go take a hike and you know, get in this rhythm and then like see this, you know, beautiful overlook or something, and like want to go like climb down this rock and like get a better view or something, you know, like that's like a thing that I want to happen in my playing. Like, I want to play this piece as if I was taking a hike and saw this beautiful sight and climbed down this rock to get a better view, you know, or whatever. I mean, it's so important to me. And I think everybody probably knows this in the back of their head. And like, I think I probably did too, but it, you know, it took a while for it to become obvious to me. But it's just as important for us to serve our music, to live a balanced, like holistic life in general, to do the things that we want to do in our life, musical or not, to be the way that we want to be, because that's what I want to hear come out of someone's instrument or someone's voice when they're playing or singing. Like, that's what I'm most interested to hear, is like is to hear somebody's story of their entire life.
Yeah. Wow.
You know?
Yeah. No, I, it's so true. And those walls that we maybe want to put up between our musical life and our personal life, or whatever you say, I think just you are Ethan, I am Jason, you know, and like what the story of your life and your music, it's so inexorably entwined.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lesson I know I learned later in life, but it's just that resonates so strongly with me, man. And you know, I usually wrap things up by asking advice you might give your younger self. That might be what you might tell your younger self, but I don't know. But and man, I would love to catch up with you in person at some point, to catch a show or do a round two. And I'll link up to your website, YouTube, whatever, cool. You know, everything social. But maybe I'll throw the question out anyway, even though you gave such a beautiful answer. If you could go talk to, I don't know, Olympia, Washington age Ethan about to head off to Ithaca. Any words of wisdom you might give your younger self?
This again is probably going to sound like a lame answer, but no, there are no words of advice I would have given myself, because the place where I'm at now is completely a product of where I've been, and the places I will be later is completely a product of now. And I think it's important to have like the times of reckoning, like the times of confusion, or the times of like thinking one way is really good, and then realizing that your energy's shifted or whatever. It all goes into the whole experience, and so I think, you know, I think maybe having some like insider advice from later Ethan might lead to having like a less full experience, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I you know, I just try and value as much as I can, like, you know, I I guess like a phrase that comes to me a lot is this moment is enough. You know, like make this moment be enough, because we don't know what's going to happen. Like I might go buy some groceries after we get off the phone here, and like somebody hits me in their car and I die. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I know.
And it's dark, but like it's you know, we're a finite being, like in this form on this planet, and it's not guaranteed that we're going to stay here. You know, and so just to try and make this moment, get what I can out of this moment, and try and be the best person and the most to myself and courteous to those around me and whatever else in this moment as I can, and just be glad to be on this beautiful planet, and you know,
I know,
be glad to be able to have this opportunity to hang out and talk with Jason Heath for a while, you know.
Well, and say right back to you, man. I appreciate so much with the schedule you've got. Like I thank you so much for carving out some time. I know what a commodity that is. So I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on here, and thanks for doing this. I mean, I first caught wind of Contrabass Conversations probably 10 years ago. You've been doing it that long, right?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the first episode I remember was when Project Trio had just started and done that first record, and I just that was so cool. I've been checking back in with the podcast since then. So I appreciate everything you're doing for just making this great database of all these wonderful musicians and bass players for everybody to learn from. It's really, thank you for doing it.
Well, thanks for being a part of it. And it's so fun for me to get a chat with you and with other folks. And I learn a ton. And even if there was no podcast, I'd want to be chatting with you for an hour anyway. So it's like an added bonus, you know,
Totally.
Yeah, cool. Well, best wishes on the road, and I'm sure we'll catch up in person sometime soon. And I'd love to have you on for round two when you get a chance to catch your breath sometime in the future. So thanks, Ethan.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
Sounds great.
Ethan, thank you so much for chatting. Folks, check out everything he's up to and follow him on Instagram and other social media at his website, ethanjodziewicz.com. And if you're wondering how to spell that, we have it in the show notes, which you can find at contrabassconversations.com. And while you're there, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and do that. It's totally 100% free, and we have all sorts of options, whether you're on an Apple device, an Android device. If you want to get the links to the shows and a little bit about the show emailed to you, you can get on our email list, and Spotify, Kindle, I think you can get, there's a Kindle app. So you can get these episodes delivered to you, which is a great way to do it. Because let's face it, folks, we're all busy and we're not going to go hunting and pecking for new bass content, probably. So sign up, subscribe, join the international bass party known as Contrabass Conversations. And Contrabass Conversations is produced by Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Trevor Jones, and Mitch Mooring. Mitch is making beautiful basses. I was just checking out his second bass recently, and he's located just east of Dallas. He does repair work and all sorts of good stuff. Learn more at mitchmooring.com. I'm your host, Jason Heath, coming to you each and every week from San Francisco, California, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.